I don't see her. She was supposed to. Yeah. I talked to Kelly today.
Well, she comes in a little bit later.
Nope.
All season.
So we're good.
Okay, thank you. It's March 11th, 2020. The Ashland Public Schools cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV, and we are back in open session after having had an executive session. This evening, we will have our opening procedures, our agenda review and adoption. We may have a student presentation. We'll have some time for public comment. Items of interest to the public, including contract approval, Director of Finance and Operations, FY21 budget approval, Student Opportunity Act draft, Mindes academic programming update, coronavirus update, superintendent's report, assistant superintendent's report, warrant approvals, consent actions, approval of minutes, February 6, 2020, February 26, 2020, acceptance of gifts, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. Is everybody okay with this order of business this evening?
Yeah.
Mr. Kendall, I know you need to leave earlier. Is there anything that you want me to move up?
I mean, so maybe just shift the Student Opportunity Act after the programming update.
Okay.
I think more important for
And otherwise go in order, or do you want me to move the programming update to first?
I think the budget, is probably the most important thing. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, let's make sure we take care of Chris's contract too.
Yeah,
first.
sure. Okay, so we'll start then with any items of interest to the public. So if anybody has any public comment, please come on up and introduce yourself, even though we know who you are.
And
Welcome.
I'll start off. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mark Sony, welcome to school committee. Back in the sights of me for one reason, and it's on the agenda. Next, public interest about coronavirus.
Sure.
Okay. It's been said lately, this afternoon was by the World Health, we're in a pandemic with this. The Governor Baker yesterday had a state of emergency on this. And the other things are now, the schools, especially colleges, are now telling the spring breakers not to come back. They're going to do online education. My question, curiosity, is does this school committee have monies to clean up all the schools when the students that won't get affected by the virus? That's the question I want to have answered. Now, please.
So Jim, I don't know if you have just a quick response to that. We are going to be talking about it a little bit further down on the agenda, Mark.
So
And
Mark,
you-
so you don't have to stay all night if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Until we get there. But the answer is yes. We have the resources right now to clean effectively all the buildings at this point in time. We had a meeting today with our administrative team as well as our custodial supervisor, and we're focusing on clearly the areas that people touch most often, door handles, bathroom areas, things of that nature where there could be easy transmittance. So yes, we're doing those things, and we have the resources currently. It doesn't mean, as with every public school and or college or university, we could quickly run out of materials as well. So we're working with appropriate vendors to make sure we get the material we need to continue to be successful cleaning.
Okay, and to add on to something like this other thing that was talked about on the news and everywhere else, have you made up your minds on giving permission for students to go across the ocean for trips?
The answer is they cannot. It was actually the Commissioner of Education a week ago banned all international travel, as well as most recently national travel at this point in time.
And just another curious, has this town been touched by it? In the students or administration or anything?
We do not have any cases at this point in time that I know of, and I met with the Board of Health today.
Okay, and let's hope it stays there. And I'm not.
Odds aren't in our favor, my friend.
And I'm not going by what the federal administration in Washington say. I'm not going with that.
Nor am I.
It's what's on the ground, town ground,
Yeah.
and in the humans I'm going by. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We will go to the contract approval for the Director of Finance and Operations, Christopher Matthew. Hello, welcome back. Congratulations. And we're looking forward to working with you.
Likewise.
Who's got the
So,
contract?
my understanding is that Mr. Adams has met with Mr. Matthew and worked out an agreement in line with what the school committee discussed in executive session before, that it is a salary for, it's a 3-year?
3-year contract.
3-year contract with starting compensation of $135,000 a year. And with that understanding, having reviewed the document, I'd move to approve the employment contract for Mr. Christopher Matthew. Am I saying it right? Okay. Matthew, as Director of Finance and Operations.
So we're doing 2 motions, one for approval and then one for authorization.
Yeah.
For design. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I'd make a second motion to authorize Mr. Adams to execute the contract with Mr. Matthew.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, excellent. Welcome aboard. Thanks. Next up, the budget approval for FY '21.
Just bringing this. Gotta make it official. Welcome aboard. We apologize for those 6 individuals at home trying to see this. Miles, I think you said they can see it on your screen? Yes. Okay, so.
Never been so conscious of how often I put my hand
Yeah.
on my face.
I know they said people would touch their
There it is,
hands
yeah,
to their
got it,
face
good,
like
thank
100
you.
times a day.
So, as you know, at the last meeting, when we had our public forum, I had presented a budget that we had discussed that was a needs-based, that had a number of positions in it with regard to special education, as well as keeping in line a number of our programs that we've developed to keep our kids in district versus out of district costs. And we knew there was a delta with the town number. And so this board asked me to go back and have conversations with Town Manager Michael Herbert. Since then, we actually had conversations with the Finance Committee. Mrs. Tosti and Mr. Kendall and I were present at a Finance Committee meeting, and there was a pretty good sized delta, about $700,000 initially, and with the town number. So I went back and I had conversations with our admin team, but with Ms. Duran, and trying to figure out how we can reconcile and balance this budget for the FY '21 school year and budget. And what I'm presenting to you is a balanced number. It's a number that does match with what the town has asked us to present. It has some interesting pieces to it, which I think I need to stress that we are putting a lot of pressure on our entire budget by utilizing a number of revolving accounts that will no longer be available to us after this year. And as you know, and I've talked about this for 6 years, when we start using revolving accounts to fund positions that are in salary lines that need to be sustainable, that scares the heck out of me. And some of these positions do that. There is hope on long term, though, however, that Mr. Herbert and I are working through some policy questions and with regard to the out-of-district special education stabilization fund and the purpose and need and use of that in future years, as well as looking at continued students who will eventually be coming off from our out-of-district costs, looking at retirements. Even since our last conversation, we've had 2 more retirements. So that has an impact on how we adjust for next year. And so here we are with the number that I'm looking to present. So what I will ask the school committee to approve tonight is a school budget of $34,775,363, which is approximately a $1.5 million increase over last year, or a 4.48%. And this, again, is in line with what the town has asked. I think it's critically important that we show you how we got there, though, because that's the concern that I'm having. And again, it's yellow. Why don't I always fix it every time? So again, when we look at the numbers, and we're starting with last year's number, obviously our largest impact is contract and salaries, right? $1.3 million increase. And again, this does not include, we have yet to figure out, we're in negotiations with four unions. How will that impact the overall budget scheme as well? We don't know. The key line is the new personnel, 465,000. That number was about 550,000 the last time we met. And so we've reduced a couple positions, and I'll explain that. And I don't mean reduce like current positions that we have. I mean positions that we were asking for in previous budget items. Where you'll notice the major difference is additional use of school choice. We're adding another $450,000 of school choice revolving account money to offset current year operating budget. The reason that I'm very comfortable doing that this year, and again, that money won't be there next year, but the reason I'm comfortable doing that is that $450,000 directly relates to two students who were school choice students and who we eventually had to outplace out of the district. And the way school choice money works is we get reimbursed just like a circuit breaker for those kids who are outplaced, but the money flows through school choice. It doesn't flow through our circuit breaker number. So we get the money into choice, and as we dug more deeply, I feel really comfortable saying this money is directly attributable to special education, and it should offset special education costs. The positions we're asking for are all special education costs. Then we're tapping into other resources, such as bus revolving. We feel comfortable, Barbara and I felt comfortable that we could reduce it by another $53,000 for next year. Again, I talked about retirement savings, another $70,000. So as we started looking at some of those revolving accounts as well as savings, we were able to get the number down to where the town has asked us to be. That, again, I can't stress enough, however, that I'm concerned about FY22 and FY23 and FY24, only because heavily relying on revolving accounts that are not going to be replenished. That $450,000, those two students will have graduated. So that additional money that we've put into our choice will no longer be there.
So they will have graduated?
They will graduate this year. One graduated last year, and one is graduating in June.
Right, but be clear, we're paying.
We're paying it out, right, correct.
That out of district.
I want to be clear.
The circuit breaker is only, 4 times our foundation.
Over a certain amount.
Right,
Correct.
our per pupil
Yep.
foundation, right? So now that expenditure is also not going to continue, right?
That is
So-
correct, but we accounted for that already. I've accounted for that in our budget. So the expenditure for that student who was out of district for, $200,000 is not in our budget already. So, but if we were to look at it from apples to apples, we could have applied year after year, like we would have circuit breaker money, which we do, the choice money against that expense. That's all I'm saying. So we have that flexibility because the money was there designed for that student, and we didn't apply it in years past. So we're just catching up, if you will. But it's still a concern, even though we don't have that student, our out-of-district costs still went up $356,000.
I think your biggest point is that 450 isn't to service that student.
No.
It's to service other students
students.
that will remain.
It's the positions that we're adding.
Right.
Right,
That's what it's servicing.
right.
So what you'll notice is, and if you go back and look at previous documents, you'll notice that the anticipated revenues and anticipated beginning balances in July 1 of 2020 and the revenue of 21 are a little different and from the original budget presentation. And what I would say is that part of that reasoning is we went back to look at true numbers. Quite often, Barbara and I will look at numbers that are we're projecting. We can go on the state website, and then after the budget, the first budget from the governor came out, we have an idea of what is going to be set aside for circuit breaker. We have an idea what's going to be set aside for Chapter 70 and for school choice. And so we adjusted to be a little more, accurate in the sense that they're more real. And sometimes we budget and we anticipate, and we might get 2 more kids. And that number goes up throughout the year, the choice number, if you will. Or we're at $1 million at the beginning of July 2020. That's because of the 2 years of collecting school choice money for those out-of-district kids. Typically, we should be seeing about $250,000 to $300,000 in revenue in school choice, and have that in our revolving account. That's about a year's worth. We have 51 kids, and at $5,000, it's $250,000. That's what we should be having in our revolving account. We've built it up, obviously, because of the out-of-district kids. What you'll notice is also the expenditure of the choice for FY21 is at $840,000. When I presented the last time, it was 300. You have that number off the top?
275.
275. So we added 450. But what we also did was, and Mr. Kendall made this point last time, we typically, as a school committee, you grant about $115,000 of choice funds to the schools and to technology. We've never really accounted for that within the operating budget, if you will, of the revolving account, but I've added that in here so you get a true identification of what we will have left. The 450, the 275 plus the 115. So as we move forward and you look at 400,000 projected balance of 571, we've typically spent 250 plus 115. So about 365,000. So as you can see, it's starting to get, that number is going to start dropping significantly. Circuit breaker, again, we now know that number was a lot lower before. It was like 900 and something. It's at 1.3 million. We know specifically what we're going to get now. That number is a real number, and we will collect that money throughout the rest of the year. So we're always a year behind, if you will, right? So that's money from FY20. The anticipated revenues for international tuition, 2 things are important. One, we have 1 kid that we've approved. I am not recommending that we have any more students based on the current situation with COVID-19.
Can we revoke?
But we can, actually, and that's something that we have to have a conversation about. The issue is part of the reason why the international tuition number went up a little bit was actually because we just received the first payment for this child. And so we have to account for the money in the current year earnings, therefore, but we have to go back and look at our contract with that 1 kid.
Can you maybe just explain on that, because it's caught my attention.
Sure.
So we had an anticipated July 1 beginning balance of 240.
Yeah.
We have revenues of 15.
Yep.
When we're showing the anticipated expenditures, that's just showing that it's drawing down from that account?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's not really expenditures associated with international tuition?
Not at all.
Right.
So we've built, again, it's sort of, we've built that up as well. So what we've done is at the high school, for instance, with our English language learner teacher, we added an ESP, paraprofessional, for English language classrooms at the high school. And we're offsetting other English language teacher salaries with that account. Because we're seeing, obviously, the contract that you allowed us to enter into said if you are an international student, you get X. But if you require ELL services, we're going to charge you more.
Right.
Right? And so we just feel comfortable saying, we're receiving these funds, we're going to offset some of those costs in the operating budget that relate specifically to ELL. Further questions on that piece, on this? Because this is the nuts and bolts. This is how I get to the number. You can see it's a dramatic use of revolving accounts.
I mean, I would just say, you know, I mean, I appreciate where you're going with it. I share the same concerns that you have voiced, which is really this is not a sustainable model. This is based on a one-year patch because of other circumstances that we think will take care of this problem, meaning that we won't have the same problem again. But on the whole, I am certainly concerned that we're using so much one-time funding to try to resolve what our ongoing expenses, even though we think that the lack of other expenses in the future will offset for that. So I don't think I'm saying anything other than agreeing. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, so, you know, Mrs. Tostin and I met a little bit after I came to this, and I said, you know, what Jim, so you figured this out, but we didn't get anything, right? There's nothing, and I said, well, actually we are. And so the next slide shows that we're still adding almost 11 positions in this model, in the use of the funds. As I started saying at the beginning, it's the sustainability that I'm most concerned about. But I feel comfortable that Mr. Herbert and I can work through some conversations with regard to the special education out-of-district special ed stabilization fund and the use of that and how that could be used in future years. You know, it's currently designed because of the policy that it can only be used in the current year if you have overage of unexpected costs in special education out-of-district students, right?
With approval at town meeting.
With approval at town meeting, a 2/3 vote. It's a policy that, it's a good policy, and we've used it one time. But what we're seeing is, as we capture more and more of those out-of-district costs within our operating budget, that's the concern. We're not having the unexpected, if you will,
Right.
as often because we're capturing. But the capturing is what's really skewing our budget and making it really unsustainable as well. So
if you didn't say that, I think the balance on that $600,000,
about 640.
$640, that is basically, and we haven't tapped, which is good, right?
Correct.
It was there to be our own sort of internal circuit breaker, and the fact that we've budgeted well is
Right.
probably why we've only had to look at that once in 5 years. And I think it was a negligible amount of money, if I remember.
About
right.
140 or
Yeah,
yeah, about
more
140.
than
Yeah.
For the record, I don't consider that negligible.
17%, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, we're building programs, and all of these positions that we're adding are helping sustain those programs we've developed, and they will invariably save us money out of district cost.
Right,
without
as long as we can continue to support
Absolutely, as long
them
as we can sustain
moving
it.
forward, yeah.
I'm being very, I mean,
Yeah.
I hope I'm really clear, anyone watching this, we can balance the budget. We are balancing it. It comes at a great cost to the system, long range.
And maybe, Jim, if you could, because, you know, not everybody's paying attention to all these discussions. I think you've done a kind of quick analysis of how much money every year these programs that you're referring to save because we're avoiding out-of-district costs. Do you know those numbers off the top of your head?
I do. I mean, it's approximately $2.5 million at minimum. That's really conservative. It's probably more closely aligned to about $4 million a year, and that's after a circuit breaker reimbursement from the state, because we have 123 kids currently in district programs that we've created. 25 to 30 of those kids could easily be outplaced, if not more, in addition to the 36 that we anticipate next year. And if those are $50,000 a kid, that's on the real low end, right? It's pretty significant dollars, another 1.5 million. So that's why we do it.
Thank you.
Right, so conversations ongoing are going to be important.
They are, but as you know, the Board of Selectmen require, our vote needs to be tonight by town charter.
Well, and I think it's important to note that, you know, I think we appreciate the conversations you do have with, you know, the town, you know, town manager. We're fortunate that we do have a town manager that understands and gets it, and a FinCom and those things, but, you know, we appreciate that we didn't have to fight to get to that number, which is above our policy, by the way.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, the policy that we agreed to, that we start from each year.
0.7 of a point.
We were higher than that, right? I think it's 375 or something.
378.
You know, something
Yep.
like that. So, you know, so we definitely appreciate that, but, you know, the asks obviously are all both educationally and fiscally responsible.
Correct.
And we're gonna pay for those services regardless, and this is obviously the better route to go. I think it's got better educational, you know, decision and also fiscal. If we pay for these services elsewhere, it'll cost the town a lot more and probably have to sacrifice a lot more, so.
Agreed.
And it's just not all dollars and cents, the benefit of keeping children in their own community,
Yeah. Absolutely.
so forth.
Can I ask just a quick question?
You can
Of course.
ask.
Jim,
Sure,
back
you can.
on your chart,
Yep.
that one.
Yep.
Just the last column, FY22, anticipated budget offsets. Can you just quickly, what does that mean, the budget offsets?
So that would be, so currently, what we're anticipating expenditures this year is 2.6 million, offsetting the budget. So we're trying to project how much we'll have available next year
I see.
to offset
Okay.
next year's budget.
Okay.
Is about 2.4 million.
It's
So-
equivalent to the expenditures.
So you'll notice it's a reduction of about $274,000 is what we'll have available.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
so,
Karen, I don't know if you had anything, if not, I'll make the motion. No. I move to approve the FY21 school department budget of $34,775,363.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
and I'll get Mr. Kyra's.
Okay, so we are going to move the Mendez academic programming update ahead of the Student Opportunity Act, so Mr. Kendall can hear about that.
You can have it.
Yeah, I got 10, 12 minutes.
You know he doesn't talk that fast, right?
Hi,
Hi.
How
Thank
are ya?
you. Thank you for having me again.
thank you for being here.
Wanted to provide a quick update of where we are in the process of looking towards our transition. Last time I was here, we discussed that while obviously the ultimate goal is for a unified Mendez for the year of 2021, 2022 school year is really how we landed. We knew that it was important to figure out how we were going to get there, and that implementing a plan for next year is really what became a paramount activity for us to undertake. So I wanted to give you an update of where we are there, and hopefully add some clarity to this process. So again, I don't have to read the motion, but you all know what the motion was. And I just still want to remind everybody of our task, because our task is to unify the structure and instructional delivery, incorporate the best practices that are currently in place at Mendez and in education as a whole, mainly focusing on flexible skill-based grouping as one of our major priorities, and still allow for authentic mentoring opportunities. And I think that, you know, that's sort of gotten lost in the translation of what mentoring is, and I think that our teachers are really focusing on that authentic mentoring piece, which is more like a role modeling opportunity, less a mentor and more a role model. So I think it's important to sort of clarify that language for us at our school level. So where are we now? Well, obviously our task is to figure out how this is impacting the 2020-2021 school year, because that's coming up pretty quickly. Normally at this point, we've had an options night for incoming third grade families, and we did want to put that off until we had some further discussion. We've had multiple conversations about this topic. We really have exhausted the conversation. It has been a truly collaborative effort, and it has mainly involved our team of teachers who represent our multi-grade population. Several conversations with our multi-grade teachers. We've asked some specialists for some input. We've invited our counseling team in, but it really has involved Mrs. Bennett and I working with our multi-grade teachers. And I think one of the things I'm most happy with is that the plan that we're to present to you tonight really came from them. I think that they would agree that It was a long process and an arduous process, but ultimately, the plan that we're presenting really came from our teaching staff. And I think it's important for you to know that. Again, it was just essential. Their input was essential in this. So what was the process? So we explored a variety of different ideas and options. And over the course of these conversations, we ultimately came up with 3 different options. We explored the pros and cons of these options and how they would have impact on students, mainly in the realm of social emotional impact, as well as obviously their academics. And we wanted to focus as much as possible on kids. Sometimes we can get caught up in, how it's going to impact us as adults, but we really kept the focus on the children to make sure that we were keeping them in the forefront of any plan that was going to be moved forward. Obviously, you have to look at curriculum as well and make sure that whatever decisions we make have the least amount of impact or negative impact on what we're doing in terms of a curriculum. The other thing we took in mind was the thought that our ultimate goal is to keep the best of what's happening at Mendez right now. And we know that we feel strongly that we can get there in 21-22, but we don't want to not use the best of what's happening in 2021 in order to get to 21-22. So we want to make sure we are truly bridging the gap and not now creating some sort of strange no man's land for 1 year to then move forward effectively. So in order to bridge this transition, I did touch upon this briefly at our last conversation. We were really exploring the idea of not having new 3rd graders going to the multi-grade program, and that is ultimately what we have decided as a team, that we would propose that 3rd graders will not be placed in the multi-grade programming, that all 3rd grade students will be placed in a single grade classroom for the upcoming school year. Now, how that will ultimately look in 2 years will certainly be very different with how things are moving for our students and in how we're utilizing flexible skill-based grouping. But we're confident right now that our current 3rd grade teachers are utilizing flexible skill-based grouping to a certain extent. And while it's not the final product, we still are confident with the delivery of instruction that they're going to be providing our kids. And we think that it's best to offer a opportunity to move forward, knowing that the multi-grade model as it looks today is certainly not going to look the same in 2 years, that it does not make sense for our students to be entering that population. How does that impact the current students is really what happens now. Right now we have 160 students in the 5th grade. 160 students in the multi-grade program in total. 60 of those students are 5th graders. So this will lead us with a clean 100 students next year, 45 of which are currently in grade 3 and 55 of those students are currently in grade 4. So our ultimate proposal is to create what we're calling a slow transition and a slow phase out, and offering a hybrid 4-5 multi-grade option for our current students who are in the multi-grade neighborhood program. This would mean that across our school, we would now have 4 classes in our multi-grade with an average of 25 students in each class. We would now have 9 classrooms in grade 3, 8 classrooms in grade 4, and 7 classrooms in grade 5, with an average of 23 or 22 students in our single graded population. This is really typical to what things have been. Typically, at least since I've been there, our multi-grade population average student has been a little bit higher, so it's not all that different. Right now, I think our grade 4 population is the highest average of student, but we're okay with these class sizes, and we know that we can succeed with these class sizes as is proposed.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Mike?
Sure.
When you have the grade 4 number 185 and grade 5 151, that's just because of the size of those cohorts?
Those are the numbers of students that will be in the single grade population.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how many students will single grade.
So those are really just the current 3rd graders rising to 4th and 4th rising to 5th?
That is...
In the single grade?
Right,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So, what do we feel are the pros of this? because there are both pros and cons, and I wanted to present them both to you to show you that we really did exhaust the conversation here, and all three of our options had pros and cons. Now I'm presenting to you the option that we ultimately fell on, but to talk to you about the pros. And the major pro, or one of the major pros, is that we really felt this option was the only option that truly still offered the opportunity to have the best of our current model, or the best of what we currently allow students to experience. And one of the major things too is that this allows for a continuity of programming to a certain extent, and it allows a slow phase out, and not just a sudden impact end where we're just ripping a Band-Aid off. We're allowing our teachers to take some time to allow that slow end that they would really like to work with the kids, to have them have at least a bit more of the experience that they had originally signed up for, albeit it's not the exact experience, but it is the closest model of the options that were studied. Allows a continuity of friends, teachers, expectations. We still get to provide skill-based grouping, and there's still potential for role model opportunities with this model. It's a true transition. It offers that slow conclusion. It doesn't offer a quick, as I said, Band-Aid ripped off moment. And it really has a limited curricular impact. All of the other options, or the other two options that we looked at, would call for the potential for some serious curriculum gaps, particularly in social studies and science, for the students who are currently in the multi-grade program. Obviously, we needed to look at that. And another thing that this allows for too is to have that continuity with some of that skill-based grouping for our students who are right now achieving above grade level, and that are going into classes that are not their current grade level by design, but they're in a 4-5 class or a 3-4 class, and it really allows for some continuity there for those particular kids. Some of the cons, okay? And I think one of the major cons that I think we spent a lot of time, or I know we spent a lot of time discussing, was that there's a shrinking population. We are now reducing the population of students in the multi-grade, and therefore what we're doing is we're in fact reducing the population of students that our multi-grade students come into contact with on a daily basis. Do I think that's something that we can try and mitigate through some hard work and through some creativity in our programming? I sure can, but it's still a con, and it's still something that needs to be noted. And it's something that we need to be honest with parents about, because typically we have a population of about 160 students, and if you look at our different grade levels, they're about that same thing, ranging from 160, as you pointed out, Mark, to 185. That's where we are. Those are the students that our kids are seeing on a regular basis. Well, now these students will be in a cohort of 100, and that's significantly less than what we are typically having our students work with. And there's also a redistribution of classes. If we are eliminating 3 classes, and those 3 of our teachers will be moving into the single graded teaching population, it means that there needs to be a redistribution of classes to create 4 classes instead of 7 classes. I will be honest, we are still in discussions of exactly how to do that. And we want to make sure we are thoughtful. We felt like this was the best plan, and that we do have some ideas that we floated and how we can do it, and we really have fallen on 2 different things. There's really only 2 different things you can do. But we are still discussing exactly how that redistribution looks, but we still felt confident enough to be able to make this decision. And then the other thing is that when our students who are currently grade 3 are in grade 5 in 2021, 2022, there's going to be yet another reshuffling of these students. And that's something that we have taken really careful thought of. And we need to make sure that they are not just becoming a cohort of 45 students. And that's just, because that's not appropriate. We need to make sure that they are now integrated into our regular population of single graded students, and they're not thought to be just this extra group, because that's not how anybody envisions their future. We know that it will entail a reshuffling of these kids when they are 5th graders, and we will fully integrate them, and we will make sure that we are having really careful consideration of their placement to make sure they're with peers that they know, and we'll be taking extra care with that placement. But it's something that becomes a difficult, it was a con in this particular option.
So Mike, I know one of the challenges with the two programs is the interaction and the fact that, they kind of run distinctly from a, recess perspective or lunch perspective. With it shrinking down to 100, is there potential for some mixing there?
So there's going to have to be. There's going to have to be some mixing, and that's one of the things that Mrs. Bennett and I were talking about today, is what is that going to look like schedule-wise, and how are we going to make sure, because we're not going to hold a lunch of only 4 classes.
Right.
So we're going to have to create a schedule which would allow for that integration and for that cross-population, so to speak.
To me, that's actually
That's a
a
good thing.
pro,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that'll help with
Yeah.
that concern
And-
for those third graders.
And recess as well. But we still want to be able to figure out how we can offer some sustainability with our common planning time and
Right.
look at those things. So those are important aspects that we need to look at for our entire school population. But yes, obviously that is one thing that we're taking into.
Because I know some of the kids that would be excited to be able to potentially see
Many kids.
their friends that are in the other
Ma-
program.
Many adults will be excited to have that happen as well, because that's something that we've talked about at a whole school level, is having a greater level of integration for the two programs.
Right.
Kind of, before you go again, you talked about the curricular gap.
Yeah.
And I do understand what you're referring to that. When the current third graders get up to 5th grade,
Yeah.
are they out of alignment in terms of what the
So
frameworks
we're
are?
getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Good.
I'm gonna hope to add some clarity to that, Mark.
Okay.
And I also wanted to say that this was the only option really of the 3. Well, there was another option that could allow for an opt-out, but we also think that this provides parents some opportunity to decide if they would like to continue with it in this sort of new hybrid model, or if they would like to opt out. But I think it's really important for any parent who is listening, and we will obviously be offering, some opportunity for parents to hear this in a different avenue, having some meetings with parents, and probably doing that over Zoom, and sending some letters home and whatnot. Because there are implications to an opt-out, and that comes with these curriculum gaps that I'll get to. But we did want parents to know that there's an opportunity for them to make that decision. So right now, the curriculum challenges that we'll present, and I'm sorry, this is small print, it's tough, and it's a meaty slide, but I felt it was important to at least be able to include as much information as possible. Right now, as you know, the model that our multi-grade utilizes is a different model than the classic single grades for teaching of social studies and science, because all students are fully integrated 3, 4, and 5. So they have their own sort of system to make sure in every child's 3 years they are getting all of the curricular areas. Currently, our 2019-2020 school year in science, they are teaching all of the life science units for grades 3, grades 4, for grades 3 and 5, and 1 life cycle unit for grade 4. Okay. So that's how they choose to do it. Next school year, any student in the next school year, any student who stays with this current configuration would not have any gaps. What they could potentially have once they reach 5th grade is some duplication, okay, for science. And we'll get there. But if they stay, there will be no gaps at all. And you can see that this is how it's worked out. This is what they'll be studying for the 2 years and then the next year. The problem is if parents decide to opt out. So where gaps are created is if a parent who's a 3rd grade parent decides that they are going to opt out of the program for their 3rd grade child. Now, obviously, they would do that for a variety of reasons. That would be for them because it's not the program that they originally planned for. They don't want that shrinking population. This will be understood, but I feel it is my charge to make sure folks know that this could present a curriculum gap in the following areas. These 2 grade 3 earth science standards, earth and human activity and earth systems, and forces and interactions for physical science. The reason that this would cause a gap is because it would never have been taught to the child if they left. Okay, they didn't get it this year, and they would not get it next year as a 4th grader or next year as a 5th grader. So they would just never get that piece. If they stay, they will get it. And we did not teach the 4th grade social studies curriculum this year for 2019-2020. If you look back, our social studies curriculum that was taught was our grade 4 social studies. So if a current grade 3 student opts out of this hybrid model and enters grade 4 single grade, they will have a repetition of grade 4 social studies. Next year they'll have the year after they'll have grade 5 social studies, and they will therefore never receive the grade 3 social studies standards.
Mike, sorry, the opt-out is only for the grade 3 parents because...
No, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to do the math of what...
It's easier to explain if we go grade by grade.
Okay, thank you.
So, because there are different gaps that are created. Right. Because our grade 4 students were with us last year, or last school year. Mm-hmm. So grade 4 students have different gaps that will ultimately be created. A grade 4 student would ultimately have an earth science and physical science gap. Because if you look back at the cycle, in science, in the current year, they taught the life science units, and last year, they did that 2021-2022 year. So that's what they taught. So they'll sort of miss that middle column, which would have been taught next year. And much of it is 3rd and 4th grade curriculum, and these students will now be in grade 5. So grade 4 students would have a curriculum gap in earth science and physical science, and they'd have a repetition of grade 5 standards. Now I will tell you, that's not a terrible thing, having a repetition. Mm-hmm. And I will also say because grade 5 is where we do the MCAS testing, there is a review of all standards in grade 5. I will not tell you that it's a deep dive into the standards, but there is a review of all of the standards. But there will be gaps. And in terms of their social studies, they will have missed the grade 3 curriculum. And they will have a repetition of the grade 5 standards. So really just important for folks to know. Now, are there ways that we can try to mitigate these curriculum gaps? Yes, I think that would involve a lot of creativity, but I think that we're creative enough to do it. I think that it would involve some alignment of schedules and some moving around and some trying to move some kids and give opportunities. And I also don't know how many people will opt out. I think what people need right now is for some clarity and for some information and for us to know and have a direction of where we're going. Mm-hmm. And I think right now there's a sense of unknown, which forces people to say, well, do I even want to stick around? I think now that people understand what the plan is and have some information, we might find that nobody chooses to opt out. We might find that 20 people do, but we need to be able to see that and then plan forward. Obviously, we have to be ready with some contingencies. If there are a high number of folks that opt out, we're going to have to maybe revisit this plan. But we have other options that are in place, or other options that are available to us. And if only a few kids opt out, I think that we can be creative. I know that I've got a partner in crime over there, Mrs. Bennett, who has an incredibly creative mind and a gift for scheduling, who would make sure that we were able to put some things in place to make sure all of our students were ultimately getting what they needed. And I'm confident that we would work hard to do that. So I want to reiterate that this, to me, is one of the most collaborative ventures I have ever been involved with in terms of working with a group of teachers. And I'm really proud of the work they did. They were able to sort of take a difficult situation for them, because we all know that our multi-grade teachers are really going through a lot and highly emotional this is emotional for them, and this is a difficult situation where many of them feel like they're losing something that's incredibly important. And they were able to come up with what I feel is a really great plan for our kids and for our school district as we move towards a unification model. So the work that they did was great, and I'm glad that I could present here on their behalf, which was what was really an idea that stemmed from all of them. So thank you. Happy to answer some questions if you have.
So this is the transition,
This is the bridge to the transition.
and what is it going to be?
Well,
You're still working on that?
Yeah, so we are getting closer
Yeah,
to that,
okay.
but we felt like we needed to pause that because we needed answers about next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with April looming and classroom placement looming
Yeah.
and teachers needing to know, what am I teaching next year? What
Right.
grade am I teaching next year? And parents needing to know, where's my child going to end up?
Right.
We needed to really put a halt on the planning for 21, 22
Yeah.
and focus on 2021. I look forward to presenting to you yet again, sort of a 21, 22 update, but I'm not there yet. We're not
Okay.
there yet.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
ready yet.
But you're still working towards that? so-
Yeah,
right,
yes,
this
and
is-
I think
this-
now
got it.
with this being proposed,
Right,
we can now return
yeah,
our energy to that.
sure, got it.
So, Mike, one of the things that was certainly identified, I think, by everybody involved in this discussion as being a plus in the current neighborhood program, multi-grade program, was the mentoring aspect. And certainly that's something that I think we collectively charged you with ensuring was going to be a part of the future program. And I understand what you just said. That may be a year down the road. But how do you see this transition plan sort of addressing mentoring? And I can see that 5th grade to 4th grade, it's a little bit different than 5th grade to 3rd
Sure,
grade.
sure.
But also if you've gotten as far as thinking about, eventually there will be a last class out. Right? The current 3rd graders are going
Yeah.
to be without somebody to mentor in the current structure.
Right.
So I'm just curious what the dialogue has been around that and how you, if you are able to continue some mentoring going on.
Yeah, so one of the major pieces of dialogue was that was brought up as one of the reasons we had to at least go with this option for the immediate
Yeah.
future. And we have had some great conversations about 2 years from now and how we can make sure that not only the current 3rd graders that are in the multi-grade can become mentors, but our 3rd graders who are in the single grade can ultimately become mentors. And we've had some really good dialogue around some vertical teaming across the school, not just for a group of 160 students,
Right.
but some vertical teaming among all 660 of our students, and how we can do that. And there's different ways to do it. There's different teaming models we can utilize, and we can match up certain groups, and we can have students now potentially working with the same teacher in certain aspects for a certain amount of years, and the same kids to have some role modeling and some authentic mentoring experiences. Now, will it be the same as we have right now? No, but we feel like we can offer that opportunity.
Great. Thank you.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, I look forward to being able to kind of come up
Yeah.
here and present
Yeah.
those thoughts to you. But we still have a lot of work to do on that plan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
great.
do.
This is a really important first step,
Yeah.
and it's important to get this right
Sure.
and
Need
get,
to be thoughtful about it.
exactly,
yeah,
and take the
very
time
thoughtful about it.
before you jump into something completely new. You've
Yeah.
got to really make the transition work.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we never could have gotten there without this.
of course.
In that group.
Yeah.
I have just one other question. When you're talking about the people involved, have we gotten parent input into this process yet, or?
Yeah, so not yet,
Okay.
Mr. Terry. I really felt like this was something that, while I always consider parent input to be incredibly important, and we appreciate parent input, I felt like this really needed to come from our teachers who are going to be working with the students day in and day out. And I feel like in every conversation, our multi-grade teachers were representing not only themselves, but also who they really know as their parent community quite well. And this plan ultimately did come from them. And I think that was the most important thing right now is to, and I think it also, providing parents the opportunity for an opt-out gives them a chance to still make a decision. And we will have like I said, looks like it's going to be done over Zoom or some sort of go-to meeting type of technology, but we will have an opportunity to provide information to parents and then have some questions and answers. But this really was the model that was proposed from our teachers.
Well, yeah, especially since you're talking about curriculum and things like that, and that's really a teacher discussion. And I'm so pleased to hear about the collaboration, and especially with you and Mrs. Bennett leading the way, but, so everyone feeling like they have a voice. And certainly, everybody is such an important part of the whole building, the whole team. And really happy to hear that everybody's working really well together and that everybody has a voice.
Yeah, I mean, they were difficult conversations.
I'm sure. I mean, it doesn't mean everyone has to be happy
Yeah.
about every aspect of everything.
Right.
It's a transition.
No, it was, but I think saying that shows the professionalism that our staff was able to show during this process. Because, and I said that in the email to them that I wrote to them today, is that these conversations were difficult, at times emotional.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think we've come up with a really good plan.
And we really appreciate that aspect of it as well.
Sorry to go doomsday on you, but so when looking at the numbers in the classroom and the numbers of children left over, say 33 to 36 opt-outs, that leaves you with half of the classroom. Potentially. How would you plan around that, knowing that the class size is already on the higher side in the existing?
We've got a threshold here, so we've talked about that as a team. If we reach below a certain number, if we have a certain number of opt-outs and our class sizes is going to be crazy low,
or crazy high, and vice versa, because you've had to.
Well, no. So we're not fearful about things getting crazy high, because we're reaching a number where we will just scrap this plan and we will go to one of the different options.
Okay.
We had 3 different options, and the other 2 would really be able to be incorporated if we have a large number of opt-outs, and we're confident in those options as well. We just felt like this was the model that provided the most out of our checklist that we needed to incorporate.
Okay.
But we're fully prepared if we do have more opt-outs than we right now are predicting.
And then with that, so there's sort of a two-phase question on the curriculum gaps. One, if there were opt-out parents and they know going into it full well that there's going to be a curriculum gap, could we as a district provide materials to help close that gap in their own time? But can we make sure that it is an equitable thing and not just the frequent communicator parents that always get what they need?
So what I really want us to try to do is be creative in our scheduling to mitigate those gaps. So that's what I was saying earlier, that depending upon the number, depending upon where we are, our first charge is going to be to do some creative scheduling to not have gaps, to prevent those gaps. And I'm
Right, so if a kid has to pop over somewhere else to the social studies
that's
class,
right.
but that only works if they're only missing social studies.
That's right.
Over on their
So
side.
if we need to make sure we're aligning schedules to allow for that, Mrs. Tossi, that's essentially what we will try to do. If we find that that's impossible, then we'll work with families. But I have faith that we can. I'm not going to sit up here and make empty promises. But I have faith that we can at least make a real honest attempt to mitigate those gaps.
Okay. So with that, it sounds like then you wouldn't be necessarily worried about a temporary drop in MCAS scores here.
I'm always worried about a drop in MCAS scores. That's the world I live in. I'm constantly worried about that.
Or
but,
necessarily caused by this.
Yeah, I don't think this will cause it. No, but we always have to be concerned about how we're doing, and I think that this won't provide us with detrimental MCAS scores. I think we're going to continue doing great instruction and continue to do what we're doing. But yeah, I don't think that this move is going to cause a drop in our scores.
And you know, this is just a personal sharing, is that I'm less concerned about having to repeat something, because that's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing.
You know, that did happen to one of my kids unintentionally, because of the neighborhood, and, you know, who knows what happened or where the disconnect, but got to 6th grade and found out that the math class she was taking in 6th grade was the exact same math class that she had had when she was in 5th grade. And I was at first very unhappy about the whole thing. Waste of time, whatever, she's already mastered this, but honestly, it's one of the best things that really could have happened, because it just, you know, gave her that year to be a leader. She understood the material at a deeper level. You know, 10 years later, she's like a pre-med student that's mastering math, you know, and I just don't think we should get as concerned about maybe overlapping with some information. Different teachers sometimes, there's a different focus on some of the material, and I only share that because it happened to me and I was not happy, but that turned out to be, you know, not a good thing.
Sure.
You can be in charge of talking to parents who are upset about
I'd be
that
happy to
outcome.
do that. I mean, I can only share my own story, and
Yeah.
people might have their own reasons, which I respect, for not wanting that, but if you had done that to me at the time, all I'm saying is, because I'm an old lady and it already happened, is that what I really looked at as a con was, in my family, a pro.
And again, I think it's important to reiterate that the things that we're talking about right now would be for parents who are choosing
Right.
to opt out.
Right.
So that's why we're giving this all up front and saying this ultimately would be parental choice to opt out of
Right.
what we are proposing this plan to be.
Right.
Now, granted, what they opted into in the beginning has changed, but we're doing our best to keep it as similar as possible to what they had originally signed up for, at least for one more year. And you know, so but we feel it's really necessary to allow them the opportunity to make a different different choice for their child if they want it.
And I think everybody will appreciate that you're giving them complete information. You know, they're not finding out halfway through the year, like, oh, I already had this class. Parents are going to understand that before they make their decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
do
think,
we-
sorry, I was just gonna say, just the work that you've done, and when we think about, like, thinking back to 6 months ago of when we were thinking about this, and the gravity of the changes and all the different impacts, and then, you know, what happens in this scenario, that scenario, and the worry of the parents, I feel like it's such a 180 from where we were 6 months ago to this, and that you're giving the parents the opt-out, even though we hope, like, the phase-out approach is minimal for opt-outs. I can't believe the work that your team's done. Like, this was a logistical nightmare, and you guys pulled it off.
Well, we hope.
Still got a ways to go.
We have confidence.
So do we need to vote to approve anything in terms of a program for next year? I don't know if we're at that point yet. I mean, our goal originally was, we asked for something more specific for sort of the next phase of this, right? But we are, to some degree, still implementing a change in the academic program as it affects next year. You know, I don't know if we intended to take that up tonight. I don't know if we have to. I don't know that there's anything more that Mike would be reporting to us in the future that would sort of require further discussion of this.
I don't think so. I think he's presented the option that they would like to move forward with.
Right.
The next phase, I think, is more, you know, will be more input. When you talked about the parent input, you know, the next phase, when you asked about that question, I was
Yeah.
thinking, it's really the next phase is where the parental input is going to be a little bit more heavily involved.
Yeah, for sure, because that's going to be the long-term.
Correct. That's a
sort of
long-term
permanent type of thing.
blending and you know.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about this. This is
Yeah.
what we're doing next year. We implement this model is different than what we're doing now.
It is, but
Um,
I'm not sure I guess I'm not sure, Mark, if
Yeah.
it's actually required of the board.
I mean, if
because
it-
I don't think it's.
it's not gonna
if
hurt
we were to
anything.
change
It's not our
the
vote,
schedule
but it's not on- do we
in
need
any
to
other
have
school.
Vote on the agenda, if we were gonna vote on it.
Well, the subject is on the agenda, which means we can take a vote related to it, so we could. We also don't have to take it up now. I think there's no rush to it. Not even sure we need to do it. It's certainly something we could wait to have Paul's, final input on too. So if we're gonna take a vote, he's a part of it.
So what I think is important, though, is he's up against the deadline.
Yeah, I
with regard
prior-
to letting families know
Yeah,
and
right.
reaching out and teachers. So that's
So, I mean, I guess I'd say this, I'm comfortable taking a vote of support for this.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that may be of some value for you, that you have the school committees.
I think what this
Support.
allows us to do is to invite parents in to let them know what decision has been made,
Yeah.
and to provide some clarity to our teaching staff, and then start working on a new schedule.
Right.
Right.
And to start the placement process.
You need to move forward.
Yeah.
So if I were to put this out there, if we were to have a motion, something like move to approve the transition plan for the 2020-2021 school year at Mendez, that would be sort of in line. Is there?
Yep.
All right, so I'll go ahead and try to make that motion more articulately. I move to approve the Mendez academic transition plan for the 2020-2021 school year as presented by Mr. Kyra.
Yeah.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for all the work
Right.
that
Thank
you're
you,
all
Mike.
doing.
Thanks, Mike
Appreciate
and
it.
Claudia.
And for keeping us
and
informed.
the teaching staff.
Right,
Yeah.
teaching staff.
Yeah, great job,
And we'll
everybody.
look forward to phase 2 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And phase
Yeah.
3 with a new
In phase
Mendez.
3, yeah.
yeah.
All right, back up to Student Opportunity Act.
Yeah, we'll try to get through this because it's really hot in here.
Yes, or just a
For no other
basic
reason.
summary at
Right,
this
no,
point.
but no, so I presented last time.
Yeah.
The Student Opportunity Act, and the requirements.
Thank you.
That we need to present to the Department of Education, rationale for how we're going to utilize some funds, the additional funds that came from the Chapter 70. I shared with you a draft. What they're looking for are 4 commitment areas, if you will, that we're going to identify certain subgroups that we're going to focus on with funding to close gaps. Second thing is looking at, evidence-based programs to close those gaps. So what programs are we currently using? What programs are we thinking about using in the future to help close those? A monitoring and outcome metric using, it's very simply, the Department of Ed has areas of, metrics that they want us to look at, and so we just identify which ones we're going to use. For instance, one concern I have at the high school is our Hispanic Latino dropout rate and/or graduation rate. So that's something that Kelly will be focusing on and having conversations with site council and making it a priority. But then how do we measure it? Well, the Department of Ed says, look at your chronic absenteeism and annual dropout rate. So we have a metric over the next 3 years we can look at.
So does that have to tie to like what we have in 1 and 2?
No, not
Okay.
necessarily. Nope.
Right.
We've identified a few things, Mark, and 1, 2, and 3 don't necessarily or aren't costing money on the budget line.
Right.
It's just we're focusing on it. However, I do mention under the monitoring for success. If you look at the Naviance piece, the college and career readiness can actually tie into that as well. And the 4th piece is how we're going to engage families throughout this process, not just before we submit this, because it's due March 30th, but how over the next 3 years, how we're going to continue to engage. So I certainly have a number of action items that we will continue to engage in, whether it's looking at the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee, which Kathy Silva was trying to run and get started last year. It's been really difficult. This year, what happened is trying to get feedback on some of the student subgroups, so the Hispanic Latino community. So what we did, and thanks Paul and our principals, what we did was we created a survey just for the Hispanic Latinos, so the Portuguese as well as the Spanish-speaking students in our district, grades K through 12. And I had all the English language learner teachers, so I actually did an actual hard copy of it, so it's easier to get home, especially for the younger kids. Even though we're not focused on closing achievement gaps K through 2 because we don't have accountability there, I felt it was really important to get their feedback and feedback like what is it we can do better as a district. And so we sent those home. We identified not only kids who are currently ELL kids, but kids who are no longer ELL, so who are not identified, but also whose families speak a primary language at home is Portuguese or Spanish, but their kids may speak fluent English, so they're not an L student.
Right.
So we still sent that home. So we went through our student database and we're able to identify all the families where their primary language at home is not English, but it's Spanish or Portuguese. So they got the survey as well. It's due back tomorrow, or Friday the 13th. Is that 13th?
Friday the 13th.
The 13th.
That's why I just said Friday.
Yeah. so
No wonder why it's a crazy week.
so it's coming back Friday.
Friday the 13th.
And so one of the other things that, they wanted us to do was just identify some evidence-based programming, and whether for us, looking at responsive classroom, looking at our literacy initiative, and look at co-teaching model, which is the direction we want to move to, which I didn't talk about tonight with the budget, is the 2 positions that we actually took away. One was a co-teaching stipend, and so a dual teacher stipend, as well as a ESP for that dual enrollment class, because we want to move to a co-teaching model. That's really where we will find the biggest impact on student learning. Years ago, when they went to the dual cert model, certification model, it was a cost-saving measure. Not necessarily what was best for kids. In talking to teaching staff, 2 teachers who are certified in special education and or one in special education and the other in general ed, it's so much more, the outcomes are so much greater.
So that's the difference. That was one of my questions.
Yeah,
So
that's
co-teaching, one's special ed and one's general ed?
Well, co-teaching model would include a special education teacher,
Yeah.
so a licensed teacher, not a.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from our
Yeah.
paraprofessionals. They do a
Yeah.
great job.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a different license. It's a licensed position, and it's a teaching position, as well as the general ed teacher. So they'll co-teach certain classes. So if I'm in an inclusion classroom, maybe that special education teacher's in just teaching 2 classrooms, two days, 2 periods a day with that teacher, then moves to another teacher's classroom. So, and those are actually areas that the department wants us to head into. So these number 2 and number 3 tie directly into what the department's looking for.
My only other question was whether you feel like these also tie into the blueprint?
They do, and I write that in the initial focus on student subgroups.
Okay.
I actually write, as we know, in our blueprint for continuous student improvement.
So you just outed me for not having read, huh?
No, I'm just
Thanks,
saying. So the one thing the commissioner was really clear on, not corona virus, what he was clear on with regard to the Student Opportunity Act was, don't recreate the wheel. If you've got a strong strategic plan, or in our case the blueprint, utilize that information and submit that as part of the product. So this is due at the next, I put it on here as just a draft so you can review it, and if you have questions, we need to take a vote on it at our next meeting, so we can submit it on the 30th. That's all.
Thank you.
So I'll just say, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get to our next meeting, that I reviewed it before, and except for the obviously the first part, but it was part of some of the discussions with you, and so I have no concerns about what you're proposing to do.
Great.
Excellent, thank you. All right.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Last thing, because this is my
Yes,
superintendent's
this is your
update.
I was going to
report.
think,
The moment that you've been waiting for, Mr. DeSoni.
This is your update.
This is
Right, we're
great.
gonna be talking about the coronavirus now. Yeah.
So this has been time consuming, or all
That's an
consuming.
understatement.
It has been a challenge for not only superintendents and principals and district leadership, but town management at the state level, the national level. This is real. the spread of COVID-19, as you know, is all around us within the communities that surround us, whether it's Hopkinton, Natick, Framingham, just had their first case today confirmed. And it's inevitable that it will land on the streets of Ashland. But what I want to continue to emphasize is we can take preventative measures individually as well as a community, whether it's practicing really good hygiene, washing our hands. My hands are about as dry and cracking as I've ever had them because of not only the continuous washing of my hands, but the sanitizer, and they're sore. But practicing that, we're not going to do social distancing tonight.
Maybe next time.
Being very careful.
6 feet away
Yeah,
or
being
something.
very careful of if you're not well. It's been really clear. The governor yesterday did declare a state of emergency, and what I want to be clear with our community, and we talked about this at our admin team today, was that the state of emergency was done not because there was this panic or fear. It gives the governor some powers that he has without having to go back through a legislative process or to look for a budgetary process and seeking funds that way. So I think that's critically important for everyone to understand what he meant by a state of emergency. It gives more flexibility to the executive branch.
As I said, one of the things that goes with that is it also gives communities an ability to seek reimbursement for
That's right.
some expenses as well. So it's beneficial to
Sure.
locals as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that in a moment. So what I want to stress is that every decision we've made and continue to make is not done in isolation, whether it's dealing with COVID-19 or a snow day or any of a really high-level decision. I'm continuously in contact with Mark Orem, our Board of Health, Michael Herbert, our town manager, as well as all superintendents and the State Department of Public Health. And what I can say unequivocally is at times we feel lost as well as superintendents. There's been not a tremendous amount of guidance headed our way, even from the governor, but also with regard to the Department of Education. We've had one phone conference last week where at that point the commissioner recommended no international travel for students. The governor certainly has reiterated that. But yesterday the governor, and agreed upon by the Commissioner of Education, Mr. Riley, said, listen, we don't want national travel either. So field trips that are national, those should need to be postponed or canceled.
They give a time frame on that?
So this is where clarity does not exist. It's when we're talking about even large gatherings. What does a large gathering mean? And we have, the notion that, okay, maybe it's 100 people or 200 people. Well, poor Rachel's got 185 people at her lunch in Ashland High School, right? I mean, so is that a large gathering? Yeah. But what does that mean for a school system, right? So while we're having these conversations at a state level saying, well, we don't want our employees to attend an event with, say, 100 people, it's impossible for us to conduct, at 8:20, we'd have to start the first lunch and then get 15 people through. And then maybe by 2:40, we'd be done.
How do you feel about Cheerios for your lunch?
But those are things that we're still trying to cipher through, right? And so the things that we're implementing, I think, are critically important to share with the community. One, we've stepped up our cleaning process in all of our rooms. We had, conversations with, John Murray, our custodian supervisor today, and our workers are doing a heck of a job. But they're focused on areas that are easily touchable, that students would readily have access to, whether it's in bathrooms or classrooms, desktops, things of that nature. They're being wiped down. Teachers are really vigilant in helping make sure their rooms are clean as well. So, but that doesn't mean it's 100%, foolproof. It's not. That's not going to happen. So, that being said, I wrote down all these notes about what are we doing. Our food, nutrition services. So Lisa Bowden made it clear to her staff and today. Listen, there's no self-serve anymore. Because that lends itself for students and adults to be able to, put their hands in things, and we don't want to do that and have the access to that. So we're no longer going to be allowing students to do that. She has applied. Well, the state has asked the Food and Drug Administration at the state level or at the federal level to allow Massachusetts to add more opportunities for bagged lunches, if you will. Because what happens is you don't get reimbursed necessarily if you have students are supposed to eat their lunches or meals on campus. That's the reimbursable piece. But there are some, like the Framingham summer school program, they can provide a bagged lunch and get reimbursed through the federal government for food. So the state is asked to have more opportunities for all of our schools, because what happens if we're forced to shut down for 3 or 4 weeks? Our most vulnerable kids are not getting meals. And we're concerned that if they can't get meals because they can only have them on our campus, then that's one defeating part of the purpose. But can we figure out a way to have our cafeteria open, create bagged lunches, and then allow those kids to take the food with them and still get reimbursed? But we need federal government approval for that. So the state is actually working towards doing that. It's really good stuff. So the other piece is, I know there was some little consternation about having events like tonight. We have our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade concert, and again it goes back to working with the Board of Health, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, recognizing the fact that we do not have any at this point in time cases in town that we know of that have not been reported, if there are any. I do recognize the fact that you can be asymptomatic and still be carrying COVID-19. I get that, and you may not show symptoms. It's certainly impacting, the elderly, those with compromised immune systems, those who are already ill. Those are the groups that this is impacting dramatically. The healthier individual may not notice that they're carrying the virus, and that's important, and we recognize that. So after having conversations with Superintendent Association tonight, the town manager, as well as the Board of Health, and in light of more cases popping up around us, and that's important to understand, that we're starting tomorrow. We're canceling all events, after school, non-essential events in our school system. That certainly has an impact. It's the outside groups that I'm most concerned about, right? So I don't want to walk away here saying, okay, is athletics going to happen next week because it's supposed to start? That's still up in the air question, because we're not bringing outside people into our system. The concern that we have is, say you have a rental over the weekend. We're bringing in outside groups. We don't have protocols in place to ensure that they're clean, that their hands are clean, we just don't have that ability to do that.
They come from different communities.
Different
they could have
communities.
higher
So
exposure.
all field trips will be canceled at this point in time. We are.
Jim, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Like, how far out are you
Yeah,
looking?
great question.
Are you talking DC? Are you talking?
Yeah, right now we are.
Cape and
The
fifth
commissioner,
grade?
the commissioner, probably tomorrow will recommend, yes, that the DC, those trips through May, if not through the end of May for sure, is what they're looking at right now, which is when our trip would be. And we have some other trips. We have Nature's Classroom, which you approved this year. That's coming up at the end of the school year as well. So we have to be fluid with it. We're looking at the potential for reimbursement for those, for those trips. It's costly. There's the Superintendent Association, all of the international trips through like EF Tours and all these other organizations. Superintendents have signed off on a letter that we had crafted by legal to these companies saying, listen, this isn't our fault. You need to provide vouchers, or you need to provide some refunds to these families and some subsidy to these families who cannot go because we have been restricted that travel. We do have some insurance that we purchased with the DC trip, but all indication is that it's not a significant benefit to us. Most travel insurance is not. But we're still investigating that. I'm hesitant to say that we will be able to open up the doors to do things by May. There's going to be great concern at the state level, and I think that'll come through over the next few days and weeks, that this will only get worse over the next 4 to 5 weeks. And I think we're poised in a position now to make some decisions about what's best for our kids, and take into account the recommendations that we received tonight from town manager as well as the Board of Health.
Can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
You said the MASS is petitioning on the EF Tours. And,
Yeah.
do you know whether they've done anything to coordinate with the MASC? I mean, it certainly seems that on this issue, the school committees are the ones approving the trips.
I do believe, Mark, there was conversation with that. Again, tomorrow we'll have, we'll have a communication with Tom Scott, and I can ask him that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Lori, could I ask you as the chair to reach out to the MASC and express concern? And I can say I was familiar with this because I had a client I was working with this on, with one of those companies you list. I won't say which one. That has a policy that says, if an individual steps out of the trip, all they can get is a voucher for a future trip. And there are a lot of people who signed up and said, my kid's graduating, I wouldn't, or whatever the circumstances are. So it is something that, because there are only a handful of those companies here, I think should be a lot of sort of goodwill bargaining power, if you will, on the part of school districts to deal with it. And I think if we can, on the school committee voice, because it's our budget, we approve these trips, I think we ought to advocate for the MASC stepping into that too.
Absolutely.
So I'll wrap it up by just saying there are couple other pieces that we need to be focused on. Yes, and I said this to Kelly today, I'm worried about Class A and graduation. I'm worried about, there's 2,000 people in the gymnasium for those days. And what does that look like for districts? And again, we do not have a tremendous amount of clarity coming out of the state level for us. I'm concerned about potential school closures and what does that look like in a community. And we're not poised as a district, and most districts are not, to move to an all online learning platform. We're just not. We don't have that flexibility, the infrastructure, and nor do we have the majority of our teachers trained in performing online learning. And it's a very different model. And so we're hoping, again, more clarity comes out of the commissioner tomorrow when we have a conference call at 3 o'clock. I'm concerned about attendance. They did loosen the regulations with regard to attendance and accountability. Stopping all attendance after March 2nd will not be part of the accountability structure. I'm worried about MCAS. There are so many ramifications that this will have throughout the system. We will be canceling all rentals in our buildings starting tomorrow. So Barbara will be reaching out to all of those organizations who are renting from us. That comes at a huge cost as well. EEE decimated our rental fees this winter, or this fall, if you will, because we had to shut down the fields. This is going to do the same thing. Mr. Herbert and I talked about extraordinary relief, and that we'll be seeking that through legislative process. as well.
Are you shutting down the baseball fields for youth, like outdoors or indoors for rentals?
All rentals at this point in time. Yeah.
So all the youth baseball that happens at the Mendez School.
Right. So that's where we were leaning. But I mean, that's up for certainly a conversation I'll have with Mr. Herbert tomorrow. But we're concerned about large gatherings of individuals on fields and indoors. So
It's really to the point, the question Aaron asked earlier. I think anything that we can do to get certainty around time, because, you know, if we're sitting here today and we're looking forward, and I think to some degree trying to figure out how to avoid the worst, right? Then some of these precautions all make sense,
Right.
On the other hand, we may go another 4 weeks, and maybe it doesn't turn into that. And you get a sense that it just didn't materialize the way people thought it was. And so maybe precautions aren't necessarily past May 1st or some other date.
Right.
And it does seem, it would seem unfortunate to me if, trips of any kind in early June are canceled because of what we think is going from now.
Right.
So to take it in a staggered phase, approach, knowing for sure that people ought to recognize the possibilities.
Right.
And I know you're not in a position to kind of opine on that. I'm just thinking as you're
No, I can opine. No, I feel comfortable making the statement that all events that we can postpone and reschedule, that we will certainly be looking into doing that. That being said, if we get guidance tomorrow from the Commissioner of Education that says you are to cancel all events, then that's what it is. As I said, we're hoping for clarity. Right now, the next couple weeks, the next 3 weeks, are critically important to how we proceed as a community. It's only a matter of time, and that's the bottom line.
And I think the nature of this thing is, like you were saying, Mark, what if in 4 weeks, whatever, it turns out to be nothing, but, that's kind of what we're hoping.
Right.
That we're taking all these steps
Right.
so that it is much less intense than what's happening in some other places that are further along. I mean, the entire country of Italy is shut down. And I don't think there's any way, there's not a human being, who knows how this is going to unfold. I mean, I know that there are some doctors who study infectious disease and viruses and things, and so they have a better sense of what this could look like. But I think all we can do is, under these circumstances, it's almost like an alternate reality, and we kind of have to assume. And I'm not, listen, all 3 of my kids that are in college right now are arriving on my doorstep in a couple of days, and I don't know if they're ever leaving.
They're going somewhere, right?
Locally, right? I mean, I think Hopkinton is closed for the next 2 days. They actually decided they were originally going to close for 1 day. So a lot of the procedures, again, the rental properties inside, it gives our custodial and maintenance staff the extra time and opportunity to make sure the buildings are clean and sanitized for our students when they show up on Monday through Friday. That gives them that opportunity. Now, to your point about the outside, I mean, that's certainly something that can be discussed. I think where we have control over school events and inside our school buildings, that's my domain, and that is my charge, and I'm going to do everything we can to ensure that those areas are safe for children to be in the classrooms. I shudder to think if we have to shut down for a few weeks. Assabet Valley tonight in Marlboro decided they're shutting down for the next 2 weeks. Weston is closed through next Wednesday. Framingham is closed tomorrow. I anticipate they'll be closed Friday as well. It's all around us, and I think this is a prudent move on the district's part. As you know, I'm not one to overreact to things. I like to.
What I want to be clear about is my comment about the timing really is not for us to make those decisions, but to ask for the clarity from DESE or whomever at the state level, rather than sort of say, do this.
Right.
If there's an opportunity to say, well, look, we get it. It's the right thing to do right now to try to stop it in its tracks, right? If we're successful in stopping it in its tracks, and the spread is not significant, which I think is unlikely, but, and we're now into late April, early May. Like, why do we keep the brakes on after we've stopped the car, kind of thing? And so again, because you're going to be participating in some of these calls, I guess if there's an ability to ask that question for understanding, that would be what I'd be looking for.
Sure, and that's fair, and I'll use the DC trip as an example, right? There's a reimbursement factor that goes with DC. 45 days, 30 days, 15 days, or a week before, you could, the amount of reimbursement continues to go down by, so we could say, okay, we're not gonna make any decisions for 45 days for DC. Okay, so rough numbers, we would lose $20,000. So let's hold off, okay, let's get to 30 days. Now we're gonna lose about 35,000. So the further and further we go out, the more and more they continue to, so we just have to make good decisions on that end
to me,
too.
that's a different animal to me. To me, I mean, what we're looking for from state guidance at this point is clarity about what the recommendations are, what the requirements are, if they are talking about requirements.
How
The other
far out they
practical,
go.
the other practical pieces are things we're going to have to make our own decisions
So,
on.
well, I'm gonna tell you right now, we're not gonna get that clarity. I just don't believe in it. I don't think the governor was real clear yesterday with his comments. I think there was a lot of ambiguity, and the superintendents are sitting around saying, okay, what does this mean really? Okay, so Hopkinton makes a decision and Framingham makes a decision. So Holliston, Medway, Natick, Ashland, Dover, Sherburne, we're all sitting there having these conversations like, so now a bar has been set. So if anything occurs within our community, the expectation now becomes, you've got to do exactly what these communities have done. And that's a struggle because not all communities are the same and not all communities have the same resources.
I personally think, it's not my decision to make, but the closure, temporary basis of one district surrounded by many others that are open would seemingly have very little impact to me. I mean, it has impact on all the people involved.
Yep.
But when you're talking about trying to stop the spread of something, it works if you got an issue in Hopkins, just as an example, and you put up steel walls around, everybody's boxed in, and then you close for 2 weeks, fine. But everyone here probably has people they interact with every day in other towns with the kids are going to school still, and unless the state, it's kind of a statewide thing.
Which I would not be shocked if that happens.
And to be honest with you, I don't know when the right time is, but that makes more sense to me than individual districts doing
Right.
something
Yeah.
based here. Because
Right, and I understand that, but there, again, the number, I think the number, well, as of yesterday, it was 70 of the 92 cases, right?
Biogen.
Came
Were
from
all
Biogen.
Biogen related. And that is sort of a, those tentacles just are continuing to, it's in my town now, Biogen. It's Stowe, I had 15 kids, elementary kids, quarantined yesterday. And it was a Biogen, I mean, they weren't there 2 weeks ago. Now it is, and it's sort of, and those little kids playing with other little kids and don't show symptoms, but then
For 14 days?
it just spreads, right? So I hope we get clarity tomorrow. I don't hold out a lot of hope that we'll have crystal clarity. I think we'll still have a lot of unanswered questions.
Can I add some stuff to that?
Well,
Please do.
But let
Can I
Darren
ask
go
first?
first, Mark.
Yeah,
so with that, Jim, without clarity at a state level,
Yeah.
what is the tripping point for you and Mr. Oram to close? Is it a staff infection? Is it a student infection? Is it a
So I
family
think the
infection?
standard has been set locally, right? I mean, if you've got a presumptive case in a school system, a parent and a kid in a school system, what has been happening within this region is that specific school has been shut down and a deep cleaning has occurred. That's, when I talk about barometers being set and baselines being set, that, again, no one has given us that guidance as to what you should do. We've had guidance where people have been in contact with someone who is presumptive, and I want to be clear, and I talked about this today, presumptive and positive are really the same thing. Presumptive just means it hasn't been certified by the
Right.
CDC. That's it. It's the same, they've been tested and they're positive. But it hasn't been approved yet in terms of that test by the CDC. So we always get caught up in the words, well, it's just a presumptive. No, it's presumptive positive, meaning they've tested positive. That being said, there's no guidance as to, okay, you have someone who came in contact with someone who is presumptive. The boards of health in different towns are recommending different things for individuals. If you're not showing symptoms, go to work. No, seriously, what do you mean? I had contact with this individual who now is presumptive. Yeah, but it's been 4 days, 5 days, you've got no symptoms, and from what you've told us, your contact was very limited. Go to work. That's scary, right? And that's the kind of stuff I'm dealing with even our staff who live in different communities where there are more presumptive cases than
And potentially their children are
Well, if you
interacting
just
with
And that's-
follow
and
their.
that's
what's
exactly
actually
what it
happening
is.
out there in the
Yeah.
world, like, did you follow the one case in New York with the one attorney?
50.
Like 50 or 60 people,
Right.
his wife, his kids, the person who drove him to the hospital, the
Right.
people who treated him at the hospital, like just about people at his temple, like,
Right.
so that's how this thing is working.
Yeah. Mark.
But-
Well,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, I'll just say, because I am definitely attending safety committee tomorrow, because I think this is pretty much the only topic
It is the only topic.
that we will cover. And weirdly, my role at work has made me very involved in disaster planning because of this, because we're in the IT side of support for finance, and so quarter close is going to be upon us in a few weeks, and we have a lot of resources that need to be working, and so doing all the planning, and so I'm getting like also the corporate view of this and what we're doing. And while I've been sitting here, Westport, Connecticut, which is maybe 25, 30 miles from New Rochelle, which is, cordoned off by the National
epicenter.
Guard. Yeah. And I have somebody that I know who's in New Rochelle. Westport, Connecticut just canceled everything. School, town offices, any public meetings, everything. But they don't have any cases. The reason why I'm here tonight and not in Connecticut is because our office, somebody had contact with somebody, and I've got high-risk people in my life, so stayed away. That said, I think it would be phenomenal if the governor and the Department of Health can come up with some better clarity, because the whack-a-mole approach I don't think works. What the Italians have done is actually based in research of having everybody shut down can really slow it down, and what that does, it does it I think everybody here is probably on the same page. It is inevitable. This is one of those things, it's sort of like the flu, but when there's no vaccine, then the spread is inevitable. But what it allows is the recuperation of healthcare workers. It allows for the disinfection of building, and it slows it down when you cancel everything. And that's why Israel has shut its borders, why Italy has shut its borders and restricted travel. And that's why, so it would be phenomenal if the governor would do that. Now, I'm also on the receiving end of seeing what's going on in our elder community. My dad's in 14-day quarantine and I can't see him. And so my next thought is to town meeting that is hosted in our auditorium, that is a mostly septuagenarian or...
So I can just share with you briefly. I was on I said this before we started, I think. I was on a conference call with attorneys who represent municipalities and some school districts. And there was discussion about regular meetings like ours we're having tonight, but also about town meetings. And there are a series of bills being proposed to help deal with town meeting season, and to allow, one would allow, for example, this meeting to occur remotely, as opposed to having us, right, I don't think we ever adopted remote participation here, but that would require a quorum to be present. So there's a bill that's been proposed by, I honestly forgot who put it up, I think the Town Council Association perhaps, to try to take that issue. Then there's also, what they're looking at is there's some things that by law have to be done before the end of the fiscal year for next year's budget. And they're trying to propose some things that can allow certain town meeting actions to sort of be voted on in a limited scenario, and I guess without getting all into the weeds, would make it easier so that some actions can be taken place. What's going to happen with those, I have no idea. But just know that there are some things percolating out there at the state level that may address some of those operational problems for the town.
Okay. The only other thing, Jim, that I think I would ask is that if we are a Google school district, right, with all the platforms that are provided by Google, could we have Paul reach out to them to see what is available within their toolkit to help us should we need some sort of online presence and teaching methodology? Like, is there a way to leverage Hangouts or something with our student population?
There is, and we've begun those conversations internally. IT was with us today when we were talking about that. It's not just that; it's teaching staff that hasn't been trained or have the ability, And I told the group today, K through 2, it's not appropriate, right? I mean, it's so we're not doing online learning with K through 2 students. We might be doing with AP kids at the high school level in terms of. So where's the equity issue with teaching staff? Who's doing what, and what's the other staff doing? There's a lot to it, and it's not as simple as just saying. And I said to a parent, "Well, look, MIT is closing down, and they're doing online." I get MIT is closing down and doing online learning. They're prepared to do that. Until UMass decided today, it was all private institutions that had closed down and said, "We're shutting down." MIT, Harvard, Amherst, all the NESCAC schools, that's what we're doing. It wasn't until UMass finally, and the governor was pretty vague yesterday when they asked about UMass with Harvard and all the other schools. He's like, at this point, no, but we're working on something because they've got all the UMass schools, not just Amherst.
But at least we were told as parents of UMass students that there will be classes online. So
Right.
somehow they're figuring.
They have that platform.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but
Right.
we don't have the platform.
Right.
Meaning the infrastructure to do that, nor does our staff have the professional development to do that. Not all of them. Some do, yes.
Sorry to make you wait, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Entertaining
Okay.
question.
Do you remember what you wanted to say?
Yes. And it's all in the same lines that I'm so glad that it got opened up and talked on. But it's because this is the very first time in our lifetimes that we got to go through this. So how can people ask what's going to happen down the road, what's going to be this, that, events, and all that stuff? My suggestions would be go on the World Health Organization website and the CDC websites, get a chronicle, read what's going on with them, and read what they're doing. Because those are the best sites to work on. And to plan, you can't plan. Because it's been said, you can't say what's happening at this moment, day, time. It's what's going on this second. It can change that fast. And I've been following since, I've been watching all these national channels and the news, and not our federal government. I'm not going through them. But I'm going through the Chinese channels. I'm going through the Israeli channels and hearing what their people are doing. South Korea is now the newest one that's being hit. Italy was blanketed. And now it's coming through to Israel a little bit. So it's global. So so the plan for Ashland is a preventative thought. That's all. And it's all positive, but you can't let it say, let other people plan. We got to be ready for this. And that's the hardest part, right, Mr. Adams?
It sure is.
That's the hardest part, because if you're ready, something's got to come up. If you're not ready, then you're going to get a whole district, parents and everybody saying, why didn't you protect our children better?
Yeah.
So you're not going to win either way.
I never do, so I'm good with that.
But I've been
Because
As
you
you
got a
know,
school
I've been-
committee,
I've-
5 people and 10 opinions, so.
Yeah, and I've been around the school system before. I left 10-something years ago, and the attitude is what it is. The Ashland sort of me first attitude sometimes. But now it's the websites, World Health,
Yep.
Center of Disease Control, and our Board of Health, and the people that can get the news. And even our fire and police departments, be on board with them.
We will all be together tomorrow, including them. So,
Yep, because responders is what they're gonna be here for. Board of Health, Mark Orm and all the companies here, and the school, and everybody has gatherings. Don't put them at risk if you couldn't. It's simple hygiene. And what's going on now is being so defensive on social gatherings that it's gonna be better off preventive and cautious than saying, oh no.
great. Thanks, Mark.
Mark. I mean, one thing that I think is really reassuring, at least with the student population that we're dealing with, is that seems to be, everything that I understand, like the least amount of risk to kids.
Knock on wood, too.
Thank God. You know, that very few, if any, kids are getting it, and I don't think any have died from it. The danger really is putting them out there to receive as carriers to bring back
passed
to
along.
the elderly population and people who are more vulnerable. So this is really it's community preservation. But the good news is that students seem to be the group that are in the lowest risk. So.
But I'm
That-
sure we
that's
do have a
reassuring.
population of students that Audrey's
Yeah, I
looking
mean, I
at that
have a
are
child who's
com-
immunosuppressed.
We do.
I have another child who works in the ER. I mean, there are gonna be kids that need extra precautions. But in general, I think all our students hopefully will still be healthy. It's just a matter of not being exposed so that they bring it to other people that are in less, you know, in the elderly population or the at-risk population.
So I guess the one question I have on the subject is, you know, sort of whether the school committee needs to vote to do anything in particular. I mean, you know, one thing that came to mind, and then when we first talked about putting this on the agenda, the thing at that time that was in my mind was the international travel, because that was before the governor said anything, and because the school committee is the one to approve, among other approvals. Yeah, I guess I wanted to, at that point, sort of talk about whether, as a committee, we needed to take a vote to cancel travel in line with the governor, what now is the governor's recommendation. At that point, there was nothing there. But there are other approvals required, including, I think, yours, Jim, I think Barbara's, principal of the building. And I guess the question is just for a logistics perspective, from a logistics perspective, are there any votes that we think the school committee should take to sort of clear any lines of confusion around who makes what decision to let you do that, Jim? Because realistically, we could have a meeting, you know, we're supposed to do 48 hours in emergency, we could certainly do faster than that. I don't have any desire to have to convene and say, all right, we're formally voting to cancel a trip. I'd rather recognize that, to your point, Mark, you know, I think realistically, we're gonna do what is recommended by public health authorities, and I don't think we ought to make an issue out of that. But I wanted to at least pose the question, you know, sort of to everybody, whether or not we feel like we need to sort of have some vote around that issue.
Like a formal motion giving him like a blanket authority for a temporary period of time on.
Yeah, I don't honestly even know, Aaron. I mean, like I said, when I first thought about it, it was specific to international travel, and realistically, like the governor still, I think, is at a point of saying they're recommending it, they're not requiring it. I think they're trying to be careful, but you know, personally, I'm not going to go against that. You know, not support going against that.
Fortunately, we don't have it.
What's that? So we don't have any. Okay, so you know,
Oh,
so maybe
we don't have the Europe trip this spring.
Nope.
Okay. So I'm not sure, you know, that there's anything immediate on it, but I figured, you know, that we can all be comfortable that the superintendent's going to make the right decision in communicating those, and I don't have any question about that. But if there's any concern about sort of a vote by the school committee. It seems like now would be a time to do it before an issue comes up. But I don't know how other people feel about it.
Mark, I like the idea because before a law passes that allows us to telepresence into something to be able to vote, we may be banned from this building and being able to vote. And if you look at what other towns are doing, right? So I think I think everybody at this table, and I know Paul would say the same, that we trust the very rational and not reactionary judgment of our dear leader. And I think giving that sort of blanket approval to make any scheduling, rental, facility changes necessary on our behalf for the next, say, 8 weeks until, or maybe 4 weeks, and then we revisit it, or 4 weeks with the extension of 8 weeks if we are not allowed to vote in 4 weeks' time, gives us enough of a comfort that we're not breaking open meeting law behind the scenes, but that we are, because everything Jim does will be done in consultation with Mark and Mike.
Yeah, I guess I say I also want to be cautious. I don't want to suggest that I'm looking to intrude upon the authority that Jim already has. You know, and so I think some of those examples, like building rental administrative stuff, there's no policy implication there. There's never a vote that comes before us. Can we rent to organization ABC to use the high school gym? That's dealt with whoever it's dealt with administratively. And I don't know that I feel the need to go that deep. But like I said, I was more thinking about stuff that ordinarily would come to the school committee, and beyond the field trips, I don't know what that would be. You know, and I would also be content to leave it as we don't get it unless it's already had everybody else's approval. If one of those other people withdraws their approval, including Jim, the whole thing falls apart, right? And so I have every confidence that from a legal perspective, the decision by any of the people who've approved is sort of a legitimate reason to cancel a trip. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and I don't want to compromise our position in terms of all those contractual issues that Jim alluded to in terms of cancellations. I don't want to take a vote to cancel something, but it may be to our advantage for him to work things out before we take a vote. But I'm curious. I appreciate the support for the idea. I'm curious what others think, and including you, Jim, whether you either feel the need for some support or want it, or feel the need for us to get our noses out of it. Or hopefully keep them out of it.
So it's sort of like equates to a snow day. I don't call you.
Right.
Right. That's within my purview.
Right.
Even our contracts, we have them written as such that gives us opt-outs for emergency purposes and or anything. I'm not worried about those types of things. And I honestly, I think how we move forward typically are managerial decisions versus policy and or in their procedural more than anything. So, I mean, I'm good. If I felt like there was a situation where it wasn't in the best interest of not only the district but me to make a decision, where I would ask us to have an emergency meeting and seek counsel, I would. But other than that, I think the guidance that we are getting, at least from our organization, has been really supportive. I mean, Tom Scott's emailed us continuously and texted me over and over saying, hey, because I said, I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
And he's like, I get it. And now the commissioner is now having the meeting Friday morning instead of tomorrow. Partly because we've given them more things to think about. Right. And that's exactly what Tom said.
Yeah.
Good. The commissioner wants more, is trying to find.
It's evolving.
And Tom said, the commissioner is like, the commissioner wants to put something in writing, so it stands, as opposed to just saying something. So he's trying to craft things that we can use. So.
Yeah.
Well, even just sitting here right now, I thought of how many parents walked in and out of the building today for conferences.
Okay.
And are we going to potentially, if we're canceling other aspects and other meetings?
We're not canceling the conferences. I think it's during the school day. It's sort of, I think, we're EDP. I talked to Melissa. She wants to continue to run EDP, and those are part of the school day. It's that extra stuff at night that is bringing in community members from other communities into our system that is I think a more concern than a parent. I would hope our parents who are not feeling well don't come into the meetings.
Right.
We can continue to stress common sense, but you know how that goes.
Not so common.
Thomas Paine wrote, right? Common sense doesn't exist anymore.
All right.
Warrants, Kathy.
You done with your
Yeah.
updates?
We're done.
Paul, you don't have anything to add, do you?
Nope, I can,
We're good.
Okay, let me get my numbers out here.
You want the bigger writing?
No, it's all right, I got it. Thanks. Okay. Between February 27th, 2020 and March 11th, 2020, I, Kathleen Bates, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $295,049.59. This includes general fund expenses of $172,288.93, revolving expenses of $81,083.31, and grant expenses of $4,014.85. Oops. Capital, $37,662.50. Finally, I authorized payroll in the amount of $1,429,542.96.
Thanks, Kathy. All right, so approval of minutes, February 6th, the workshop. Anybody have anything on that?
I don't think I did.
I did not
No.
on that one.
I wasn't there, so I always.
Okay, so
All right,
motion to approve the February,
do you have to do it separately? Oh, yeah.
yeah, February 6th workshop minutes.
So moved?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then on the February 26th,
I move to approve the regular session minutes of February 26, 2020, as presented.
what a second.
Second. Sorry, I'm spacing.
That's it.
I was,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Stuff coming
Thanks,
out as
Kathy.
we speak.
Yeah.
I
I was just looking at
think
my
I
notes
got
'cause
two
I-
copies.
Yeah.
For some reason, I
did
got
you
two
ha-
copies of the same one. That's why I was
Do you have
confused.
something?
No.
Okay.
It's all good. Thank you.
All right.
Give some donations.
Do you have any?
Yeah, we do.
All
Planet Aid, $688.10 to miscellaneous gifts and donations. Planet Aid again, $101.50. AEFI, multiple grants, $40,998.35. Weight, $95.42 for Ashpack. Humboldt's Plumbing, $300 for the Reality Fair. Ellen Wegman, $75 for miscellaneous gifts and donations for Mendez. Mr. and Mrs. Ram and Midlesh Gupta, value of 2 books on India, $130, and Shaw's gift card for Model UN for $25 for a total of $42,413.37.
Excellent. Do we have a motion to approve the gifts and donations?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Action items, nothing. Oh, member updates, sorry, Rachel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful opportunity to head down to the middle school on Monday and Tuesday and talk to the 8th graders. Just talk about kind of their transition, what to expect, what I did, how I would have done things differently. And it was awesome. It was a great experience. I went with Mr. McGann and a few other students, and we had a great time.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you.
Good, thank you for doing that.
My next update will be from safety committee tomorrow.
Okay. You did go to the play, because I saw you there.
Yes, I did go to the play. It was
You have something.
lovely as always. It's
Yeah.
my 4th year in a row going, and I have a little theater nerd that is
Yeah.
following in his mom's footsteps and loves theater. So the quality of the production is,
David does a great job.
yeah,
So good.
really, really great.
Yeah. Kathy?
Yeah, no, nothing at this time.
Just we had collective bargaining, maybe 1 or 2 sessions since we last met. We're progressing. Obviously, we don't talk about details in open session, but Lori, Jim, Paul, and I have been meeting with them, and we will continue to update you in executive session as to the substance.
Excellent. Thank you for your work on that. Go for it.
Our pleasure.
Ditto. That's it. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.